Nations want to abolish ICE. And they want to get rid of the crime fighter on top of everything else.
My deputy, Rod Rosenstein, is highly capable. I have the highest confidence in him.
Holding them accountable. Sean gets the answers no one else does. Freedom is back in style. Welcome to the revolution. Information on breaking news and more bold, inspired solutions for America.
For those folks who've lost their jobs right now because a plant went down to Mexico, that isn't going to make you feel better. And so what we have to do is to make sure that folks are trained for the jobs that are coming in now, because some of those jobs of the past are just not going to come back.
Moments ago, the numbers for America's economic growth, or GDP, were just released. And I am thrilled to announce that in the second quarter of this year, the United States economy grew at the amazing rate of 4.1%. We're on track to hit the highest annual average growth rate in over 13 years. And I will say this right now, and I'll say it strongly, as the trade deals come in one by one, we're going to go a lot higher than these numbers, and these are great numbers. During each of the two previous administrations, we averaged just over 1.8% GDP growth. By contrast, we are now on track to hit an average GDP annual growth of over 3%, and it could be substantially over 3%. Each point, by the way, means approximately $3 trillion and 10 million jobs. Think of that. Each point, you go up 1 point. That doesn't sound like much. It's a lot. It's $3 trillion and it's 10 million jobs.
All right, as we continue Sean Hannity show, there was Obama saying, in his own words, that some of these jobs, they're never coming back. The only president in American history never to hit 3% GDP growth in a single year, and he's accumulated more debt than every other president before him combined, including 13 million more Americans on food stamps, 8 million more in poverty, and we've gone from the lowest labor participation rate in history now to the highest. And that's only part of the economic story of today. Explosive 4.1 GDP growth. Joining us now is the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Mr. President, congratulations. And on top of that, I think one of the more underreported stories is that we now have a trade deficit that dropped by more than $50 billion.
Well, thank you very much, Sean. And you're right. That's, to me, is so important. Your phase two of the question, $52 billion drop in trade deficit. That hasn't happened in decades. And it's really something very special. And a lot of that is because of the policies that we're putting in place. And it's going to get better, Sean. It's totally sustainable. I look so forward to next quarter. I look forward to watching what happens over the years. It is something very special that's taking place.
How is it that trade is so interconnected to all this? And a lot of people thought you were going to start a trade war with Europe. Well, that was put to rest pretty much this week, and you said you found a new favorite word, which is reciprocity.
Well, reciprocal is very important to me because, we have countries out there, Sean, and most of you folks know exactly what I'm talking about because they'll watch and they'll see. We have countries that charge us a 100% tariff or tax, and we charge them nothing for the same product coming into our country. We have countries charging us far more than that, close to 300% in certain cases. And yet when I say, well, we're going to tax them or we're going to be reciprocal and charge them the same 300%, everyone goes crazy and they say, oh, you can't do that. It's not free trade, which is sort of laughable when you think about it. In other words, they can do it, but we can't. So those days are over. And I think that's had a huge impact, even though it's very early. I've only been doing this a little more than a year and a half with some of these, and the policies really, it takes a while to get them enacted. but it's having a tremendous impact. And if we can straighten out trade, which I'll do absolutely, and it's already happening. You see what happened with Europe yesterday. But as we straighten out trade, we can pick up a lot of points on GDP.
To be clear, though, you don't want a trade war. You want free trade, but you want fair trade.
Right. I want fair trade. I don't want trade that people think is fair and free, but we're being charged 50%. As an example, China, and I have great respect for President Xi. I think he's a friend of mine. He may not like me so much anymore, but we'll be friends again. But China charges us 25% when we send a car to China to be sold. When they send a car to us, we charge them essentially nothing. They say 2.5%, but it's not even collected. So they get 25%, we get like nothing. And it doesn't make sense. It's not fair. You can't compete. That's like a baseball game. I give an analogy. That's like you're having a big game with a very good team, and they score 15 runs in the first inning. So the score is 15-0. Now you're going into the second inning. It's not looking good. That's what happens when they charge 25% and we're charging 2.5% and not collecting. Essentially, that's what's happening, and we can't do that. And we don't do that anymore.
You know, one of my criticisms, often a theme on both radio and TV, is the fact that the media is so corrupt and so one-sided, and it's like every day they have a breathless thing, negative thing to say about the president. We're 101 days away from the midterm elections. I'm arguing, in my view, that it's the most important midterms in our life. But if we go back to 2016, the Gateway Pundit actually picked up some really interesting headlines that if you would have become president, you would lead the economy off the cliff. I'll read you a few of them. CNN Money said, Trump promises 4% growth. Economists say no way. The LA Times said, if Trump thinks he can get more than 3% economic growth, he's dreaming. The Wall Street Journal said Trump's 3% growth target looks out of reach. The Hill wrote Trump's growth projections leave economists in disbelief. And you got your Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman. Trump's election means we are probably looking at a global recession with no end in sight. And I can keep going. And Barack Obama, who never reached 3% growth in a year, said, what magic wand does Trump have to revive the economy? Usually the answer is he doesn't have an answer. I guess their predictions were wrong, sir.
Well, we've had the answers during the debates, and I think we were very strong in the debates on what we want to do. And if you look at the predictions, they've all been wrong. I mean, we are far ahead of what anybody thought, except me. We can go a lot higher than this. You know, if you look at regulations, nobody talked about regulations. Had my opponent won, the Democrats, you would have had an economy that instead of being up close to 40% in the stock market, they would have been down 40 or 50% because the regulations were choking this country. And I'm all for regulations for clean air, clean water. We want to have great environmental control. But they had 10 regulations when you could have used one. And as you know, I've been cutting 22 regulations for every new regulation that's put in, which are very few, because we were totally overregulated. You couldn't do anything. Highways were taking 20 years to get approved. You have a highway that's really important. It would take from 17 to 20 years to get your approvals. By that time, the highway system is different and the roads are being built a different way and you couldn't make changes. Now, this is, we're doing great. We can do a lot better. The fact is that if I can cut the trade deficit from $817 billion, think of that. We have a trade deficit with other countries. That's trading with other countries. $817 billion. If I cut it in half, right there we'll pick up 3 to 4 points. So you could add that to the 4 or 5. And so we'd be at 8 or 9. Now, I don't want to say that too much, and I didn't want to say it too much during the campaign because I would have been criticized. People wouldn't have believed it. But now they're starting to believe. And you're right. You look at a guy like Krugman, he doesn't know a thing. I mean, the predictions were so bad. A big factor, though, Sean, was regulation. And obviously a big factor was the taxes. But a lot of this, really the taxes are going to help in the future. I look so forward to seeing the next quarter because this is so sustainable. This is going to go for a long time.
You know, we have numbers that are in now, and all during the 2016 campaign, I gave statistics out. I did it every day because I wanted people to know what 8 years of the Obama economy were. And, lowest labor participation rate, 13 million more Americans on food stamps, 8 million more in poverty. He took